I'm now going to ask Bruce Glendinning from CFA Archaeology to come down to talk about Preston Tower and to kind of continue the theme of this morning. This isn't one of my favourite children, it's more like an unruly teenager. Not Bruce, the project.
Thanks, Andy. Right, how does this all work? Right, thanks, Andy. I suppose I've been called an unruly teenager in the past. Let's click onto that. I'm here to talk about Preston Tower. I'm not going to go into detail about the history or indeed the architectural styling of the tower. It's just a rundown of the work that we've been doing recently on the site. We're currently still actually on the site, so this is a kind of a work in progress, shall we say. For those of you that don't know Preston Tower, it's just actually to the south of the High Street in Preston Pans. Which if I can get this press to work, there we go, sit there, and the High Street up here. It's a scheduled monument. It consists of a 15th century tower house with a 17th century extension, an upwards extension if you like. About 100 metres to the north there's a ducat, and then it's all contained within a walled garden here, and that's thought to date to about at least the 17th century as well, and the ducat, I should have said, it was probably 17th to 18th century. So that's the site. The work in itself was commissioned by East Lothian Council, by Andy, and it's what they're doing is they're trying to create better access and interpretation to the tower and consolidate the tower and the ducat, which were both falling into a bit of ruination. So it's been a kind of an interesting project. This is just a quick couple of images here. You can see the ducat here. This is prior to its been renovated, if you like. This is what it was like when we got there. This is the tower. You can see this sort of massive 15th century tower house here below the parapet, and then the finer sort of 17th century structure up on top there. Our involvement was multi-phased, if you like. Initially, we were commissioned to do to create the written schemes of investigation to support the scheduled monument consents that are needed for the work. And then laterally on site, we were commissioned to do standing building survey, trial excavations, and watching briefs for various things that are being undertaken for the interpretation and accessibility, which is new paths, CCTV posts, new lighting columns, cables, all these kind of good things that one puts into sites these days. The initial works that we did with the standing building survey, this was done to capture the site prior to any works being undertaken. It comprised basically detailed photographic survey, a detailed descriptive survey, and the measured survey. Now, initially, the measured survey that we undertook was by a process called photogrammetry, which has taken multiple photographs against a wire frame of the structure, and then this is passed through a software program called Agisoft, which then creates scaled elevations, which you can see. Oh, I'm too keen. Which you can see here as one of them, and this is a scaled representation of the tower. We also took the floor plans that were held within the National Record for the Historic Environment, and these were digitized and checked for accuracy and were found to be of good quality, so these were used as part of the measured survey as well. I should add that the photogrammetry was undertaken by the architects on the project, which was Grove Rains Architects. Many of you may know the company. And the process in itself, because the tower is so tall, and with photogrammetry you have to try and take photographs as face on as you possibly can on the structure, you get what's called parallax error, and the whole thing sort of bends out and it doesn't look very good, and obviously decreases the accuracy. We used both ground photography and drone photography to take photographs up through the height of the structure, is why it looks, you know, pretty accurate, as you can see there. This is two of the other elevations, the eastern elevation and the southern elevation. Again, you know, these are scaled. You can see this sort of 15th century tower down here, you know, the massive sort of like tower, and then the finer sort of 17th century structure up the top with these and they're not very clear on these, which is what I'll come on to, but these very fine sort of pieces of architectural detailing above the windows and the doors, and a very, very different architectural style, but again, I'm not really here to dwell on that. This is the western elevation. Again, we can see, the detail on that. And then parts of the tower aren't accessible. The top 2 floors, there are no floors. So, actually to get up onto the top of the parapet is pretty much impossible. So we used the drone, and we took photographs. That's a meshed photograph, if you like. I think there's about 20 photographs on that. And then these are all into Agisoft and scaled. And this is a scaled photographic plan of the top of the tower, which is quite nice because it's pretty much invisible to the human eye. Once we'd undertaken the external survey, we were quite happy with what we had. These are good representations. These are scaled. They're accurate figures, and we were quite happy with it. But when we moved on to start the interior works, as I'll show you, we became less content with the results that we were getting. And these are the interiors. This is the Great Hall, and this is the interior photogrammetry of the hall. Let me just flick myself on so I don't get lost. So you see, it's not quite as good. You can see that there's a lack of definition up here and up here of the stonework. You get big problems with overexposure, with the light coming through the windows. It's very difficult to correct unless you can actually block the windows up, and we weren't in a position to block the windows or the doors up whilst we were doing this. So, this is less than optimal for a survey of such an important structure. And we began to sort of think about this as we were going through the process. This is the upper floors. As I said earlier, you have a situation within the tower where the top 2 floors, which is the 17th century structure, which is here and here, are missing their floors, but also you're missing the floor down into the tower. So you've got a 3-floor structure here with no floors, which makes it very, very difficult to record without putting scaffolding up or without other forms of temporary access, which again we didn't have access to at this point. So we used the drone in here as well, and it's pretty successful. I'm fairly happy with it, but you can see, there are problems here. The definition goes. You've got quite nice definition of the stonework up here, but then it just blurs off here, and this is obviously just to do with the movement of the drone and various things that are very hard to control, and you get the overexposure up the top here due to the light coming over the top of the ruin. Again, not bad, pretty nice quality. We were reasonably happy, but we didn't feel that really it was enough for the structure, and we felt that we needed to do something better. Andy, having reviewed the situation, managed to whistle up some money from the council somehow. I think he plundered their budgets somewhere. And we were able to commission a laser scan, and we commissioned AOC to do that because they're one of the foremost companies that do laser scanning in Scotland at the moment. And they provided us with the laser scan. Now, this is the northern and the eastern elevations, and immediately I hope you can tell that the quality of this is so much better, it's so much sharper. The big difference here is that laser scanning, for those that probably don't know or do know, it fires literally millions of points at the structure, at the face that it's recording, and creates a point cloud. So you've got millions, if not tens of millions, I'm sure AOC will probably tell me even more, points, measured points along that face, whereas with the photogrammetry, you're limited by the pixel quality of your camera and the pixel quality of any camera, really. So you're limited in the quality that it can give you. This is far, far, far better quality. And I'm sure you can see that. I mean, even just if you remember 5 slides back, you can see the difference in the way the detail at the top of the windows is picked out, and you can see the difference in the stonework. It's far, far, far clearer. You don't get the problems, and when we go to the interior, you'll see that. This is the other exterior shots. Again, far better quality. This is far more accurate as well. You know, the photogrammetry is fairly accurate. This is millimeter accurate. You know, this is the real height of surveying technology. So you know, we've got a perfect, you know, scaled model now. The real difference came when we went inside and started to do the survey inside. And I think immediately you should be able to see just you can see, hopefully on my photographs here, you can see the quality of the stonework is so much better picked out. You know, you've got detailing in here that wasn't really very clear on those photogrammetric elevations, and you don't get the bleeding through of the light, you know, through the open apertures. So you get this much clearer scan. This is the top of the tower again, these top 3 floors that I was discussing. Again, you've got the tower, the main 15th century tower here, and the 17th century additions above. And you can see that area that I pointed out earlier on is essentially sort of this area, and you've not got that bleeding out, you've not got that dulling of the quality, and it's much higher quality. And these are, unlike the photogrammetry, because you're limited by the pixels on the camera, and this is not, you know, this is, you know, these millions of points I was talking about. You can zoom on this on a stone by stone basis fairly much, and what this provides, or has provided, and one of the reasons Andy actually wanted it, is this provides a baseline record of the site now captured this year, by which they can monitor the degradation of the structure, because that's now a snapshot, perfect snapshot, millimeter accurate. They can go back in 5-10 years' time and look at any point on this structure and at the stonework on this structure and see if it's decayed or not, and it allows them to then have a better idea of how the structure is behaving, if you like, and how it's surviving, and it will hopefully allow you know, better management of the structure in the future. The great thing about the scan compared to what we had, so we were using these photogrammetric elevations, and then we were using the data that was in the NRHE, or the National Record for the Historic Environment, which I think probably was largely McGibbon and Ross's stuff, so it's quite old. It was reasonably accurate, but what we didn't really have was a proper measured building survey, which is what we really wanted. And now that we've done the laser scan, we do have that. And the great thing about this is we've got so much data now. You can interrogate the building in so many different ways. You know, and this is, oh, goodness me. And this is a slice through the building. You know, that's the dungeon, if you like, down below, the Great Hall, and then coming up, and then that is the 17th century tower up the top here. And we can create slices through this data at any point we want to illustrate the site in different ways, which, you know, I think is an absolutely fantastic thing. I think one of the greatest things really to come out of the survey, if you like, or the product I really enjoy is the model, and I think you'll really, I think AOC have done a fabulous job here. And this is just a snapshot. The full model is available on Sketchfab. If any of you want to go and have a look at that, it's on Sketchfab. I think it's under AOC's channel. That's the reference for it down the bottom there, if any of you want to write that down. And you can go there and have a look at that. And this model is rotatable. You can go inside, you can go up the stairs, you can go down the stairs, you can go into the dungeon. You can move around this building, and it's absolutely phenomenal. And you know, this is just fabulous. It just blows my mind, technology these days. And it's just a great thing. And it's so much better than the product that we were getting from the photogrammetry, and so much more useful. So that's the building survey. That's what we've done. There are many architectural, you know, there's much phasing we've found out. We've found out a lot of things about the building. There's currently a big debate going on about the entrances to the site. I promised peers I wouldn't go on about that because I don't really know the answers to it. But I'll quickly just, we've got the entrance here, and there's the entrance to the dungeon there. There is a potential other entrance in and around here somewhere that's been blocked up, And it looks like we've got a couple of phases of entrance, but we don't really know how those work. I've promised Piers I'm going to send him the elevation pictures so he can have a better look at this as well, because Piers is working on the project as well. A lot to find out about the building, but this is not really the juncture for that. I'm not a building survey specialist. I'm merely a contracts manager. I'd have to get a building surveyor in to tell you about that, and we'd be here all day and probably fall asleep. The next thing that we did on the site, or one of the things that we did on the site, is we had to do some targeted evaluation. This was along the eastern side of the tower, and we'd put in a trench in here. One of the reasons is we needed to identify whether there were any sort of like deposits or external features associated with the tower that might be impacted upon by the proposed works. One of the ideas, possibly controversial, possibly not, is that they're going to try and create a new access to the site to allow limited access to the site on certain times through a set of stairs coming up here, and these are being designed at the moment. And one of the reasons that we're so interested in the phasing of the doors and the entrances to the structure is how this particular set of stairs might look. So we undertook some evaluation along the front here to see if there would be anything potentially disturbed. First thing that we found was that there was a thick layer of made ground around the site, so we weren't looking at deep deposits of potential archaeology. We didn't expect them. This site was a landscape garden for a year, not a landscape garden, excuse me, a farmer's garden, if you like, farmer's field. So the whole site was, ploughed and rotivated and, dug over. We didn't really expect there to be much in the way of sort of archaeological deposits close to the surface. What we identified here is obviously this is just the turf. And then there was a thick deposit here of debris, and that's just broken up sandstone, mortar, rubbish. We don't think it's particularly early. We found sort of post-medieval pottery in there and things like that, and as I've discussed, just the site formation wouldn't lend itself to archaeological deposits surviving so high up. What it probably is, this is an early photograph, is this pile of yad here. And we think that that is probably all material that's fallen off the tower, been dragged out the tower when they've been cleaning it out, and that's presumably been landscaped around the tower at some point in the reasonably recent past. But what we did find was some paving here, set in this kind of quite nice sort of decorative pattern, if you like, this sort of like semicircular pattern. These were nice big stone slabs. Don't worry about these. That is just lighting cables for the old lighting that went in there in the, I think, the 90s. But these nice sandstone slabs here. These sat pretty much there, and that being the entrance down into the dungeon, and that being the first floor entrance into the site, which is what we think is the main entrance. These are put logs, holes, joist holes, probably for the access up into that particular door. This is possibly a scar for a roof over the door. But as I say, these are where these stones were. So quite interesting, but how old are they? Well, that's a difficult question to answer. You can see they're quite nice. But yeah, how old are they? I'm not utterly convinced that these are old. You have this layer of demolition material through here that you can see. And that's reasonably recent. Now, these could have survived, recent activity. I'm not totally certain. If I was a betting man, I'd say these are more like something to do with the romanticisation of the ruin. When it was a ruin, somebody's done some work to the front of it to sort of romanticise it, as the Victorians love to do. But they could be 17th century in date, and I'm sure people in the audience may tell me that indeed they are, and that would be fantastic if they could. We didn't really have any dating evidence to help us. I think there was a piece of post-med pottery came down from in here, but obviously not from right underneath the slabs. And it was difficult because we couldn't remove the slabs because it's a scheduled site, so we're not allowed to remove these things. We couldn't get the full idea of the stratigraphy going underneath the slabs. So it's a little bit of an unanswered question. Other things that took place on the site were watching briefs, and as you see, these are still ongoing. Part of the accessibility was to create a new path down to the Ducat, and then along here to a contemplation circle. A fancy name for a seating area, I believe. Yeah, contemplation circle, yeah. So these paths, because the whole site is scheduled, one of the things that, as archaeologists, we have to try and do within scheduled areas is disturb as little as possible. And one of the requirements from Historic Environment Scotland were that the path and all the infrastructure that goes in here, in as far as possible, doesn't damage the archaeology. And actually, the written scheme of investigation, which is our method statement, is written in such a way that if we do identify archaeological deposits, we have to stop, and we actually have to work out how the construction can then preserve those in situ rather than just wholesale remove them. So the design of the path was done to ensure that it sat within the topsoil deposit, if you like, so it's not going down below the topsoil, because how archaeological site formation works on a site like this that's been ploughed and worked is that generally the majority of the archaeology that you find will be negative only rather than upstanding walls and things. It will generally be negative only, and that will generally only now survive cut into the subsoil, so below the level that farming and ploughing activity has gone to. So if we stay in the topsoil, then we should stay out of the archaeology, if you understand that. So we undertook the watching brief on this. That's the path. That's the lovely contemplation circle. It's going to have benches and things in it when ultimately finished, if it doesn't already. And I hope you can probably see that we're very firmly sitting in the topsoil there, and we've not gone down into the subsoil. So in theory, if there is any archaeology in there, the construction here has left that and preserved that in situ, which is our ultimate goal, really, in working in scheduled areas on developments like this. Another piece of work that we undertook was some watching brief on the Ducat. If you know the site, you'll have seen that it has been recently renovated. It's got a new roof on it, and it's been quite nicely done. But what we had to do is clean out the inside. You can see, oops, a daisy. You can see we're almost at the end. These are the pigeonholes. Yeah, obviously full of guano. There was a lot of pigeons still living in there. That was a task for somebody to get rid of them. I wasn't jealous of that one. And these are full of guano. These all had to be cleaned out. There was a number up at the top, had fallen apart. They were taken down and rebuilt. And then you had the floor in here. And you can see that is just a great big pile of pigeon poo. Rachel, who is going to speak later, had the joy of doing the watching brief on this one, and it was reported to be not very pleasant. We didn't know what we were going to find. We were kind of hopeful we might find a flagstone floor, but when we came down onto it, it was literally just beaten earth. I mean, there was a few stones at the doorway, but they looked just to have been dropped in there at any time. So we think it possibly was just a beaten earth floor. And that was the watching brief we've done on that. So I'm going to end kind of quickly, I'm afraid. But the work's still ongoing. For any of you who know the site, you'll have seen that there's a big scaffolding up around it, and that's for the ongoing masonry repairs that they're doing. We have a site meeting on Tuesday coming. We're going to go down and have a look at the site and work out what other building surveys needed, because now that the scaffolding's up, we can actually access this 17th century area here where there was no floors. So we can now get up there and take photographs, accurate photographs down into these voids and areas that we couldn't see. So that will give us a better detailed record of certain elements within that part of the site. We've also got a watching brief still to do. There's some lighting columns to go in. There's CCTV to go in. There's interpretation panels to go in. And again, they'll all be built in such a way as to, have as little impact on the archaeology as possible. So we've still got that to do. And then another thing that Andrew commissioned is some geophysical survey. Once the scaffolding's down, the scaffolding's up around the tower, we'll do a geophysical survey, we'll do res, and we'll do mag, so resistivity and magnetometry of the site. We're going to wait till the scaffolding comes down, because if we try and do magnetometry when the scaffolding's up, we're just going to get a great big halo around the site, and you'll see nothing. So at some point, when that scaffolding's down, we've got to go back and do the geophysical survey. And that is me for Preston Tower. Thank you.
I should actually say for